Just a little brief introduction of myself. Brian Miller with the National Weather Service. I've been with the National Weather Service for a little over 34 years now. I started at the Norfolk office in 1988, and then I've been in the Omaha office here, Omaha or Valley, since 1993. I guess we moved out to Valley in 1993. I was kind of the former fire weather focal point in the Omaha office, and then in the mid to late 90s, and then kind of gave that over to someone else who ran the program for a while, and then kind of took it back over here in the last couple of years. So I did put together some slides. We'll go over some things, and hopefully it'll answer some questions. I'll kind of maybe try to stop through at each section and check for questions. Brian, if you said you're going to monitor for those, and then at the end we can have questions too. Now, I'm also willing to present this again at some time if you need it in the future. So technical difficulties are one thing that I always worry about. We don't use Zoom too much at our office. We use Google Meet. So hopefully things will go fairly smoothly here, and we'll start things out here. All right, so I want to kind of start with the Omaha National Weather Service fire weather page. There's actually a lot of information on that page that can be useful for prescribed burn information. And let's start out here. Unfortunately, you've probably heard of what a spot forecast is. I checked with our regional office and also the national level. And what that really requires is it requires be associated with some type of government agency, either at the federal, state level, or tribal level. And most people don't meet that, but there's kind of a way to work around that. And so the information we're going to present tonight should get you most of the information that you need as a background for doing a burn. So some of the first things to look at here are, we produce this graphic. It's for the whole state. Now these graphics are generated through our internal computer system at the National Weather Service, and it does take into consideration the forecast provided by offices that serve different parts of Nebraska. So the far western part of the state, the western 2/3 in the Nebraska Panhandle is served by the office in Cheyenne. Most of the north central and southwest is with the North Platte office. The small parts, 3 counties in the far southwest, is with the Goodland office. Then Hastings takes care of the south central. Omaha takes care of most of the east, and then the Sioux Falls office takes care of Dixon and Dakota counties there up in the northeast. But the Rangeland Fire Danger Index is one of the parameters that should be considered. You know, when you're doing burns, generally, you know, for you experts out there, you probably want the fire danger to maybe be in the high or very high category, so you can get a good clean burn. Red flag warnings are generally not issued unless we have extreme fire danger. So those maps are available for day 1, day 2, and day 3. Generally, those are probably pretty useful for planning purposes. And then if you're over in Iowa, there's also an Iowa map. So those are kind of right up at the top part of the screen. Percent green is something that we look at as far as the fire calculations. Everything is 10% or less right now. Obviously, everything is all dead. And so those are some of the things that you can look at for like planning purposes in a broad scale. Red flag threat index is something new that we're kind of maybe going to in the future and using that more. It's of course there are different indices out there. There's the RFD, as I mentioned, the Haynes Index, there's a GFDI and all kinds of different things. Now, if you go farther down, you can click on this map here and it'll bring up a fire weather forecast. Those are kind of county-based forecasts. Let's see if it's going to come up. Yeah, it takes a little bit here. But this FWF product is issued every morning at around 4 to 5 in the morning. And that gives you kind of a broad sense. These are county-based, so they give you a rough idea of the chance of precipitation, temperature, humidity, wind at 20-foot level. Things like mixing height, vent rate, transport winds. Now, the 20-foot wind, I just wanted to mention that the winds that are reported at like the major airports, like, well, even most of the airports, anything that's an ASOS or an AWOS, like, Omaha, Lincoln, Norfolk, Columbus, Beatrice, those winds are actually 10-meter winds or roughly 30-foot winds. So the 20-foot wind is something that's scaled back. I can't remember what the exact number is, but it's like 0.89 times the 30-foot wind. So they'll be a little bit weaker than what is reported at most of the airports. We had been putting in kind of an eye level wind. I'm not sure how useful that is, but the smoke dispersal is also listed along with LAL is the lightning activity, Haynes Index. The fire danger in this case on this product is the RFD product. Now we also have the GFDI as well. This is GFDI Ag. I'm not quite sure why the regular GFDI isn't on there, but we'll get that fixed if it's not getting produced on there on a regular basis. So let's see here. That's kind of there are some other things on this page, and what I'll do, I will maybe tweak these slides just a little bit to make sure the links are all correct, and then make sure Brian has those. He can share those out with you if that's an option for Brian to do that if he wants to do that. But I will make the slides all available. If you want to learn more about the red flag threat index, which is this map here, I think Omaha might be the only office producing it for Nebraska right now. There is a long paper on the red flag threat index that you can, if you need some reading material some evening before you go to sleep. It is a long. It's a good paper, but it is long and may not be for everybody. So because of the need for hourly weather graph type products, this was developed. Web page was developed by someone in the National Weather Service. That let's see here if we can just go to that link. And it's called the Fire Weather Dashboard. Now this will come up with this link, weather.gov. It's from the Duluth office, and then FWD is the link for it. But this is you can get the information. The nice thing about it is this is a map that can be zoomed in, and you click anywhere on the map, and you see the wheel kind of working down there. It takes maybe a few seconds, but that will generate up top here a forecast, the 7-day forecast for that point, whatever the point is that you pick. And so this is 3 miles southwest of Stanton. Gives you the elevation. And if you go down to the hourly table, those values are there for temperature, humidity, wind speed, and that's going to be, I believe that's the regular reported surface wind, so like the 10-meter or 30-foot wind. For sustained wind gusts, the direction in both degrees and then kind of with an arrow. I guess the 20-foot winds are there. Transport winds, which are a little bit higher up. They're not the 30-foot winds. Don't have the exact level as what those are, but generally to let you know where the winds are coming from aloft where the smoke is going to go, and then chance of precipitation, sky cover, mixing height in hundreds of feet, and then some of the other indices there. So there's, again, you can click on any point. It doesn't have to be in Nebraska. It can be Iowa, anywhere in the United States. So that's to me a pretty useful tool for planning purposes, and it's something we've kind of given some feedback on having this easily to be printed, and that hasn't gotten taken into effect yet, but you can easily probably do just a snip with a snipping tool if you have a Windows-based system, and just grab that screenshot. Any questions on that?
And Brian, that all that data just pulls exactly what can be found on the hourly weather forecast of each office, right? I mean, it basically pulls the same data.
Right. It should pull, yeah, no matter what weather office is providing coverage for that area. It should be from their basically gridded database, and a lot of that stuff is like temperature, dew point, relative humidity, wind. That's all hourly data. The precipitation chance may be a little bit coarser resolution after 24 hours. It might be 3 or 6 hourly data, but it's still pretty good. And so that's one way to look at that type of information. Now I'll go back to the Omaha webpage here in just a second.
Brian, I will mention too, on that dashboard, just underneath the map there's a place where you can click on that fire weather forecast. It's like the links to it are on there. So it'll pull up that fire forecast that you just, if you go back up right underneath the map there.
Oh, okay.
Right there, yep.
Yeah, depending on where it is.
Yep, it'll take you right to that first product that you showed.
Yep, I didn't know that feature, because we don't use that a lot, but that's very good information. Didn't know that. Thank you. So another way to get the hourly weather information is, you just go to weather.gov, and again, anybody can pull this up. It's all free information to everyone. Click on whatever part of the United States you want information from. So let's just say we still want eastern part of the state, and we want something for Columbus. So you can kind of get close on the map, and then if you scroll down here a little bit, if you want to change the point, let's say you want to be a couple miles northeast of Columbus or something, you can fine tune it there. And let's see, you're still seeing my screen?
Yep, we are.
Okay. And then if you saw down here, it says hourly weather forecast. It's an hourly weather graph. Just a different way of the information to be presented. So you have on the top series of graphs, you have wind chill, dew point, temperature. The next is a series of wind, and then gusts. Doesn't really look like we're going to have any gusts here the next couple periods here until maybe looks like maybe during the day. Is that Saturday or let's see, yeah, that'd be Saturday, or wind starts to get a little bit more gusty out of the southwest. But it also has, it has the same general information presented in a different format, with the wind speed, wind direction, relative humidity, etc. Now, the nice thing about this too is that I think it's like a 2-day forecast. So if you wanted to look farther out, you can adjust the starting period. this will go out to 7 days as well. So if you wanted to look into the future, this is, for Saturday and Sunday, you get the same general type of thing. And so for planning purposes, that's probably an okay type of product. Any questions on that? Well, hearing none, we'll go to the next slide. This is kind of more of a maybe not real pertinent for this group, but if you're curious about smoke and fire monitoring, there is probably familiar with the Air Now site, and I generally have this set up as a page that loads automatically when I come into work and log in. I just happen to have it centered out to the west, but if you want to know what current air quality is, let's say in Lincoln, now it's kind of limited on as to what where the sensors are, but it is good information if you're concerned about what air quality is. And it generally will, I don't think there are any fires right now, but if the fires are big enough, this Air Now site will pick up where fires are occurring. So that's just kind of a general information page for stuff like that. Now, in our office, we have something that it's called a hotspot notification tool. And that's generally for on days with extreme fire danger or there's a red flag warning out. We usually have someone dedicated in the office to kind of monitoring for potential wildfires. So we do give calls to counties if they request us that they want to be called either to the dispatch or the emergency manager. That uses a satellite, ghost satellite data based on the temperature that the satellite is sensing at ground level. It's not going to pick up real small fires, but it's not designed exactly for that. It's designed for more fires that develop on days with extreme fire danger and fires that have potential for rapid spread and to get out of control. Let's see here. Now, as far as Mesonet observations, if you want to look at real-time current data of what's going on and even past information, one of the pages that I look at least on a personal computer, is this Western. It's wrh.noaa.gov, which it's from the Western Region Headquarters site, and I have it set up to be kind of over the OAX, the Omaha forecast area, and this will show. You can control it over in the upper right as what layers there are. So as far as weather observations, you can set it to what density there is. I generally just tend to plot, but the parameters that you want to plot, there's temperature, wind gusts, dew point, humidity. I generally just look at the temperature, wind, and the wind gusts. And for some of these are, the regular reporting sites at the airports, the ASOS or the AWOS, but some of them are railroad Mesonet sites, or some are personal weather stations, some are Department of Roads. And, those are useful, but you don't always get real high quality observations from all of them at all the time. Now, other than the National Weather Service maintained ones, those are pretty good, and they're usually if the data is bad, it doesn't last very long because someone notices it and it gets fixed pretty quickly. If you needed some, let's say, historical information, at least going back for 7 days, it's pretty easy to get. So let's just click on the dot here for Norfolk. This gives what the current conditions are, and list what the valid time is. But if you want historical observations, say for the site, you want to go back and say what it was 5 days ago, click on that little 7-day thing, and then you can get a big long listing of what the temperature, dew point, wind direction, wind speed, visibility, things were like that. There was visibility down to about 2 miles with snow at Norfolk earlier, but visibility's come back up. To me, that's kind of a good one good way to go look back if you want to see what conditions were. The problem is it's limited to 7 days. There are, you can go to, I can't really mention any non-government websites right now, but there are other places where you can go back and get historical data for purposes of looking back at previous weather data back to 7 days. There's also, I put the other link in here, if you want to just kind of avoid a map altogether and go to just a link. If you know what the site ID is, let's say let's look for Lincoln. Well, that's KLNK is the 4-letter ID for Lincoln. It does kind of the same thing. It's just a different way of looking at it. You don't go through the map. Let's see, you can look at it either to 7 days. You can even, if you wanted to get, some sites have data every 5 minutes. So here, I guess Lincoln is one of those sites, so you can get the information every 5 minutes if you needed that for, I'm not sure how far back the 5-minute data goes. It may go back 7 days. I think it only goes back 3 days though, maybe. Anyway, that's another place where you can get historical data if you need to go back and look what conditions were. Brian wanted me to talk a little bit about the HER model, or we use the RAP and the HER. So the information that's in those hourly weather graphs, those forecasts are provided by a person. However, we have access to all the model data. So we may populate some of that forecast with a certain model. If you're interested in forecast information from these models, you can go to this page and I guess, let's see here, let's stay with the HER NCEP. We generally for our area, you want to look at NC, which is another North Central, and then you pick the model run. Depending on which model run it is, it'll vary on how far it goes out. But you see a lot of parameters here. If you want to know what the radar reflectivity is expected to be from this model, you can do that. Here's let's see, loops usually take a little bit longer to load. So this model isn't really expecting much for snow yet in the eastern part of Nebraska this evening. Some of the things though other things that you might want to look at, let's see here, where's the wind at? I don't use this a whole lot because of just the ability that we have to look at it on our mainframe computer system. But there are a lot of different parameters here for expected visibility, total cloud cover. Let's see if some of the soil moisture. Trying to look and see where 10-meter wind is right here. So if you want to look at what the wind is expected to do, you can kind of look at that in a looping format or individual frames, and then can be controlled by, here's the forward and backward button, start and stop loop. So there is a lot of model information out there, just about all the weather models are out there. The HER and the RAP models are probably the best as far as short term, because they're updated frequently. They do have high resolution, and they work pretty well. Now, I kind of want to speak to winds and dew points, because I know those have been at times problematic. The wind, with this dry pattern that we've been having, winds have tended to be maybe a little bit stronger. That's due to deeper mixing of the atmosphere, and the dew points have maybe dropped a little bit lower. So humidity values have been dropping maybe a little bit less than what we've been forecasting on those extreme days, on those days where it gets, into the 60s and the normal highs in the 30s. It's really hard to kind of capture this unusual regime that we're in with the really dry conditions. We really haven't had much moisture, and I'll talk about that here a little bit later. Let's see here if we can go to I guess any questions up to this point.
Brian, there was a question that what does the acronym GOES stand for?
Good question. Let's see here. It's geostationary. That was a good question.
It's basically it's just a satellite that basically.
Yeah, it's at the same place. It's a geostationary satellite. It's at the same location above the Earth, so it rotates at the same rate that the Earth is rotating. So it appears the image will be looking, or the satellite will be looking down at the same location at all the time, is basically what it is. So not sure if it's a true acronym. It's GOES, so I'm not sure if that just is part of the geostationary, or if it's an acronym or not. Let's go to the Brian wanted me to talk a little bit about drought, and I don't know. I think maybe in some respects with the dry conditions, for professional people that are doing burning, it may help some. The fuels are, because it's been dry, the fuels are certainly in most cases available to burn on a pretty readily available basis. Would you say that is true, Brian, or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the dryness has been a good thing. I think the big thing is people talk about drought, and we shouldn't be burning or because it's been dry, but our fire behavior is mainly driven by temperature, humidity, winds, and stuff
Right.
like that. We need that dry fuel typically to accomplish our objectives.
Right.
In early spring, so soil moisture and the drought has a little bit of impact on our fire behavior, but not as much probably from a standpoint as the weather conditions, just because of the the 1 hour fuels. I mean, it could rain a quarter inch the day before and warm up to 70 degrees the next day, and that fire would burn just the same as it would if it hadn't rained for the last 4 months.
Right. And the National Weather Service, when we put out our fire stuff, it's kind of geared toward everybody. So professionals like your group of people understand things better. So you guys want it to be conditions to be dry, so you can get a good, I think you do anyway, to have a good hot burn, so things do burn well. You can be burning on days that the average person cannot, because you understand things better and know what the conditions are. And let me kind of go and talk a little bit about, so this is something that I presented earlier in the week to emergency managers. So just kind of look at percent of normal precipitation since October 1st across the state. There are some areas in the pockets in the east, and that was generally due to maybe 1 or 2 days of rain in the fall that pushed the average for that period since October 1st to above normal. But in general, it's been pretty dry. You can see in most of northeast Nebraska, the precipitation is down to, in some cases, less than 50% of normal for that period. Now, the winter is generally typically drier on average, but we've been in this dry pattern. Here's the precipitation total in inches over the last 6 months. So most of the eastern part of the state is under 15 inches of precipitation in most cases, or in some cases less than 10 inches, with even less out in the western part of the state. Looking at kind of the trends of soil moisture since the end of November, it's gotten even slightly drier as far as soil moisture goes. And so the soil is dry. The grass and other fuels above that is probably pretty dry too. We want to look at a comparison of there are two images. The image on the left is from mid-February of this year and mid-February compared to 2021. Really not a whole lot of change in the eastern part of Nebraska, a little bit of change in western Iowa, and then that really dry area between like Sioux City, Sioux Falls, and then into northwest Iowa. That kind of got eroded out of there, where they did have some beneficial rains where things got better. If we want to look at the forecast for drought, are things going to get any better? It doesn't really look like it. Kind of the white area, I think, is no change, and are not really a strong signal for whether it's going to change or not, I guess. And then the brown area, which covers a lot of Nebraska, indicates that the drought is going to persist. Looking at the outlook for March, and these are done by the Climate Prediction Center. These aren't done by local weather offices, but by the Climate Prediction Center in Washington, D.C. They do these large-scale outlooks, and so the tendency is that our generally warm pattern that we've had the last few months is going to continue, with no strong signal for precipitation in the eastern part of the state. That equal chances means that the chance of being above normal, or below normal are about the same. But you see this area down kind of from Arizona, New Mexico, pointing up toward Nebraska, of a signal that a dry pattern would continue in that area. And that's for March. We want to kind of jump ahead here for looking at March, April, May. So generally the spring months, again, it appears that there's a signal for warmer than normal conditions, and also this dry pattern over the Four Corners region extending into the high plains continues. So we're looking at potentially, the warm and dry pattern continuing through the spring, and then looking into the summer, it probably is going to tendency is it may remain warm, and then the dry signal kind of switches from the southwestern United States up to the northwest United States. But it doesn't look like looks like we're coming out of what's called a La Nina pattern, and the signals for right here in the eastern part of the state are not real strong for La Nina. They're stronger in other parts of the United States, but that's kind of what it's looking at for the next several months here. These are wildfire potential maps that I've kind of brought up. We don't do those either. These are from one of the other sites. It's either from the National Interagency Fire Center. So these, no strong signal for wildfires in our area, but looking to the west and to the southwest, there's it looks like an above normal chance of having wildfires down in that area. And that's kind of about all that I really had planned for for now. Were there more questions, or are there any other topics that we can kind of just do on the fly here?
Are there any other questions? What I was going to do is, I was going to kind of just run through, as the burn boss, I want to run through basically how I look at the weather and the things that I kind of go through. So just kind of go through my process and share that with everybody. We did have another question coming in. Why is fire season getting longer in some states? It's kind of a loaded question. Brian, you want to tackle
that? Why is fire season getting longer? Well, I think there has been somewhat of a push in the last couple of years, and you can say yes or no on this, Brian, but I think it's been there have been some concerns about air quality, I think, is part of it. And if burns are spread out a little more throughout the year, you generally tend to have less problems with smoke and air quality. Is that kind of fair to say, Brian, or is that maybe what the answer they're looking for, or are they just?
I'm not sure.
I'm a little bit confused on the question, I guess.
Yeah, I guess there could be two different ways of answering. Yes, we're starting to burn more outside of the the traditional spring season, but maybe his question is more pointed toward climatic changes. Changing climate, different climatic patterns across the country. So I think there would be two different answers for that. But yes, we're seeing more prescribed fires and throughout the different seasons because we can, and we're trying to open up that window. But also like wildfire seasons. I mean, if you look at just this winter, we've had very little moisture and snow cover, and you have really dry cured fuels across the Central Plains. And so we're starting to see, more fires happening in the wintertime than maybe historically we would have, just because we're missing out on that snow cover.
Right. Yeah. Whenever you have a dry pattern, the fire potential is, it's just there. And a lot of it, can't be controlled. I think there was a fire in Bellevue here within the last couple of days. I don't know exactly what started that, but it burned out to Highway 75, and that caused some problems. So yeah, anytime, and I think probably you've been seeing that we in some of our products that the National Weather Service puts out, either on like Twitter and Facebook, that we've kind of been talking about the fire danger has been high, and I don't remember a lot of cases in the last 30 some years where, I'm sure there are some, but I don't remember that seem to be as bad as this year. But I mean, then you go back a few years to 2019, and it was a very wet pattern. So you can't really say that the weather pattern in general has turned to dry all the time. But it does seem to be there's more variability in the swinging from very wet to very dry in recent years, or at least it seems like it. Any other questions have they rolled in, or? All right, I'll stop talking, and if you need anything else, I'll hang on for a while here, Brian, if anything comes up.
That'd be great. Thanks, Brian. So yeah, I'm just going to briefly, kind of talk about my process of how I forecast burns and for weather. So, the main thing is when we're looking for a good day, right? So usually when you're writing your prescribed burn plan, we have a set of parameters in which that we're looking for that are going to be ideal for our burn. And so many of those things, we just have to basically be on the lookout for. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is like last year, I went through all of our burn data from across the state. There was on average about 10 days last year from March, April, and like first week of May, about 10 days of actual decent prescribed fire weather. So the big thing is you really need to be on top of your game, consistently looking at weather every day, all day. If you do a lot of burning, you become kind of an amateur meteorologist, basically just by constantly looking at the weather. So my process usually is on the locations that we're burning. We kind of have a priority list that we go through, but if you're looking for just yours, typically what I'll do is I start off at the forecast Omaha page or whatever district I'm in. It could be Hastings or North Platte or Sioux City, somewhere around there, or even Iowa. And what I'll do is I'll just go click on my area. And then kind of zoom into, generally where my burn is going to be. And that basically brings up the page, this page here, kind of the landing page. And I basically just take a quick look at like the highs and lows across the week and get a general idea. Like, we had some just light snow today, got like a little tiny dusting, but you can see like Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I mean, it's climbing into the mid 50s. So that's a potential burn day for us this early in the season. We have a lot of burns that we got to get done. So, but it doesn't really give me any good information as far as that hourly forecast would go. So we need to kind of find out what that hourly forecast is. It going to be too windy? What's our humidity going to be? Temperature, all those things. So what I'll typically do is I'll go click on the hourly weather forecast, like Brian mentioned, and it basically gets me to this page. Now, the default options on this thing, there's a lot of things that we don't need, and it kind of clutters up the map or the graph. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go click out of things that I don't necessarily need to know about, right? Dew point, not a big deal. Wind chill, precipitation potential, and then get rid of all the rain, snow, sleet. And then a lot of times we take a look at the mixing height, right? So mixing height, Haynes index, you typically only forecast this like 1 day or 2 days out. So you can click on them, especially if you're, got a good burn day, like the next day or two, to kind of give you an idea. But within, 5 days or so of this forecast, we'll also do 20 foot winds. And then you hit submit. And then what that does is kind of cleans up this graph for us. It makes it a little more legible. And I know one gentleman from the Weather Service, he always talks about the trend is your friend. And so when you're looking at this, you kind of look at the trends that are happening, but just make sure that you know that as you're looking at your forecast, the further amount of time that you go out from your burn, the less reliable that forecast is going to be. So, we can go look at Saturday or Sunday's forecast, but it's probably going to change, right? And so, and the reason why it changes, I think, is because, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are basically just forecasted models, forecast models that basically input this information, and it updates every hour or so, and it gets basically updated into this map. So you can see tomorrow we got winds from the northwest coming in early morning still. And then right around 11 o'clock or so, they're starting to shift to the southwest and then kind of the southeast here going. And then kind of stays southwest, which is why it's warming up, right? And so you can kind of look at this pattern, but if you had a big wind switch, let's just say, for example, like we were going to go out and burn tomorrow, and you say, oh, we're going to start burning at 11 a.m. or noon because that's when the wind shifts to the southwest. Now we're close enough that that may be like fairly accurate, but typically what happens is that you're not, that wind shift could either happen later in the day or earlier in the day, depending on how fast that system is ejecting out of the, planes, whatever it's high pressure or low pressure or something like that, that's ejecting. So you can kind of look at that. So typically we're not going to want to plan a burn that we're going to have a major wind switch, unless it's something that is going to switch and then kind of give us a long-term pattern like maybe this would be. But you can see the mixing heights, typically our mixing heights, we want to be over 1500. Haynes index, we want to be in that 3-4 category. You get into that 5 or 6, it starts becoming a little more unstable, but still can be done if you got a good crew. And then your 20-foot winds. So there's a question here is what is the standard reported wind speed? And Brian, I believe that is the 30-foot, right? That's what this.
Correct. Yeah, those are the standard level when if you see or hear on the TV or radio when they talk about the wind speed and wind direction, that is like the 30-foot wind. Correct.
Okay. So yeah, and then the 20-foot wind would be just, obviously it's less, it's more like kind of ground. But then you also got to take into account terrain influence as well too. So if you're burning in like oak woodland, if you could burn in, it could be gusting 30 miles an hour outside the woodlands, but you get inside a woodland and it's barely moving because you have that terrain influence that's blocking it. So I'll look out, a couple days out, and then basically as I get closer to that day that I'm picking, I can adjust and keep on looking at these parameters to see what's changing. You can see like next Monday, you start seeing that it's going to switch back to the northwest and blow a little bit more. And then, our humidity. Don't overlook sky cover either. Sky cover has pretty big effect on our fire behavior. And so if you have, 100% sky cover, it delays drying of fuels. So it can slow down our fire behavior, especially in like an oak woodland situation or woodland situation. Maybe not so much in grass, but it does have some good effect on that. So I really utilize this, and I'm for a burn. If I'm burning my place, I'm constantly looking at this site. But I really like afterwards, what I'll do is I typically will go to this fire weather dashboard as well and utilize this because it kind of presents the information a little bit differently and kind of and gives you all the max gust, cloud cover, all that stuff through those days and that time period. So it's a really good site. The one thing I don't like about this site is these hourly weather graphs. Can typically, like when you get to the wind stuff, wind can be kind of jumbled. So it'd be nice really if they could, if you could like choose an actual day or shorten this up to see those weather or wind patterns a little bit differently. But that fire weather dashboard, I'll take a look at that as well. The other thing that I look at too is you want to look at your broad scale wind patterns, and I think that's really important, or broad scale patterns in general when you're burning, because what I found is there's been times where we're burning at a location and literally 30-40 miles to the west of us or to the north of us, they have a completely different wind direction. And if you're not looking at that prior to your burn, like I said, that system could speed up, more than forecasted and could catch you off guard. So one of the things I really like doing is there's a couple different things. I will go back and I'll click, I'll zoom out and I'll go 30-40 miles to the west of where I'm at, and I'll go to the east 30-40 miles and just look at different patterns to see if they're changing. But there's a little bit better way of doing that. One of the ones I really like is this let's see, this new graphical forecast digital weather. So if you go to digital.weather.gov, this kind of gives you a forecast, not only of humidity across the state, but there's a sliding scale up here where you can see the changes. It's kind of slow, it kind of lags, so it takes some time to load. But if you go to wind direction, you pull up this wind direction, this is just basically a forecast. You can go out and feature, so you can see these broad scale wind patterns that are happening. Again, this is basically kind of a new page, and so it's probably pretty slow. So again, you can see these patterns. So if you're burning the eastern part of the state, and you can see maybe that the wind direction is changing in the future as well. You can look at different other parameters on here too. So you can look at temperature, relative humidity. And the reason why I like this is because I burn all across the state. So I can see the different parameters that are going across the state. So I can see, hey, it looks like in the eastern part of the state, it's going to be 15% humidity, but in the panhandle, it's going to be, good burn conditions with 25 or 30% humidity. Usually it's the opposite of that, but so that's another really good one. The old graphical forecast is kind of exactly the same here. You can see that you got wind and direction here. So you basically just hover over it, and then you can click through those parameters. You can see those kind of broad scale winds. So yeah, this one is called graphical.weather.gov and then digitalweather.gov. So those are really good to use as well. One of the other things I use, and Brian, they can't show this, but there's this College of DuPage website too that has these models on there, and it's a little bit faster and quicker to use. So I actually sometimes will use this to look at these broad scale patterns. And so, if you go to weather.cod.edu, and under that weather data, there's a numerical forecast models. Typically, I'm looking at these short range models because typically once I've looked at, all these longer periods and we're shortening it up to, okay, we're going to be burning in the next 24 hours or 48 hours. This HRR model goes out, 12 or 16. I can't remember exactly what it is. But you click on that, you can click on the plains region, and there's over here surface. Theta is the wind. So you can kind of see those patterns. We gotta change that. So again, this will show you those broader scale patterns of winds across the state. You can kind of see these are in Zulu time, so it's kind of hard to figure out sometimes. I'm not familiar with Zulu time, but I got a cheat sheet somewhere. But you can see during this time period, look, you got winds coming from the southeast there, southwest there, north, east. I mean, it's just, they're basically kind of, must be a center of a low pressure or something moving through there that causes that. So you can actually see those broader scale winds on what they're kind of doing. And, you can check out humidity, all these different things on here if you kind of play with it. It's, pretty advanced level stuff. But you gotta be a little bit careful too, because there's some model runs on here that you could look at and they're not really as reliable. So I typically rely heavily on the NOAA National Weather Service forecasts. And then I typically look at this for, broader context of winds and stuff like that.
Yeah, Brian, there are a lot of good non-government weather sites to display weather data. So yeah, go ahead and utilize those. I mean, the model data is still produced by NOAA, National Weather Service, but some of the other commercial sites have a way of displaying them that are just, they're better for some people. So yeah, those are really good.
So yeah, so the big thing is always be looking for your forecast that you need in your area. And like going back a little bit too, that don't let the drought situation. I know there's a lot of fire chiefs and emergency managers that are worried about these drought conditions, and it's a little bit of a yeah, it's dry, but obviously we need it to be dry for our burning that we're doing. So it's a good thing for us. But we also have to be careful because, you know, it's people are nervous about it. You want to make sure you pick your parameters correctly as far as, you know, make sure you're not burning at extreme conditions if you don't need to be. You know, if you can burn your ground with 50% humidity, you know, try to burn it at that. And, you know, if you need to burn at 20%, you know, do that. So always just be looking for these days. A couple other things that I like to look at. Let's see if I can get. So there's a kind of this really simple smoke screening tool that Florida does. It's fireweather.fdacs.gov, simple smoke. And basically you can zoom in on your area and then click how many acres is going to be burned. And, you know, if you're going to be doing a head fire, backing fire, what direction your smoke is or your wind's going to be. And then you click this update map and it kind of gives you a forecast area of where your smoke's going to go. So we use this a lot in the planning stages of burns. You know, we'll look at, you know, where our smoke is going to go. So if we were planning a burn here, you know, using a southwest wind, you know, we can see that it's just going to miss this town to the west, which is good. You know, we're not putting smoke right on that town. So it's a good tool just to kind of visualize where your smoke's going to go, you know, what roads or homes potentially are going to be affected by it. It's kind of a really cool, you know, thing that you can use. The other thing that's, you know, not used in my planning, but is just a really cool tool is this fire information for resource management system. And this basically has that same data that Brian was talking about of like past fires and current fires that happen on a landscape. And you can kind of zoom in and see the fires. You can see that down in the southeast corner of the United States that they're starting to burn quite a bit. You know, this is kind of their burn time, burn parameters. But as we get into March and April, you're going to start seeing the Great Plains starting to light up too, with a lot more red dots of these fires. And they also detect wildfires as well. So just some really cool sites that you can go check out. You know, I'm super interested in weather and fire, obviously. So I spent a lot of time this spring looking at this stuff. Just to kind of sum up everything, you know, big thing is, you know, always be constantly checking your weather and your weather forecast and confirming that forecast. You know, 5 days out, you may have a good idea, but it's going to change on day 4, day 3, day 2. Typically, I don't trust the forecast until we're about 24 hours out. And then I wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. before that burn. And what I'll do is I'll go into that hourly weather graph and then I'll print off my forecast and take it with me. And what that does is just kind of gives you an idea of what that forecast is going to be for the day, so everybody can look at it. But I also like to take weather measurements throughout the day. I got a handheld weather meter, and what I can do is set that up on a tripod, and then it basically automatically downloads all the data, and then I can download it to my phone, and I can compare kind of the forecast of what things are doing as far as wind, and temperature, and humidity. And that's always good too. And the reason why I like printing that forecast off is because, you know, if you've been to our other workshops, you know, let's say, you know, for the day, it's supposed to be a high of 70 degrees out. And at 70 degrees out at our peak of the day, our humidity is going to have our inverse relationship. And so, you know, at the 70 degrees, we're going to have a 30% humidity. So what happens is during that peak of the day, if it's starting to get warmer faster than normal, you know, it ends up, you know, peaking at 75 degrees, you know, or it gets 70 and it's not to the hottest part of the day, I automatically know that my humidity is going to be dropping and potentially could drop below, you know, my parameters. And so we got to either, you know, hurry up and finish the burn, or if we're starting another burn, we need to be careful on whether we're going to go or no go for that reason. We got another question. How often does lightning cause fires? It's a great question. I actually asked this question if there's been an increase in lightning fires or decrease in lightning fires over the last 30 years. Um, it's more it happens more often out west in the Panhandle and the Front Range where you get those drier lightning strikes. Um, it happens less than power lines and power poles snapping in high winds. I would say two things more than lightning: brush piles, people lighting brush piles this time of year when it snows, and the wind knocking over power poles are probably two biggest cause of wildfires in the state, in the Great Plains. Lightning, it does happen. I don't know how often or less often, but I do know a couple years ago I got a text from somebody saying that there was a dry lightning strike that started something in eastern Nebraska, which is pretty rare. Brian,
Yep, I would agree with that. In the eastern part of the state, it's pretty rare to have a lightning. It may start a fire, but then typically the rain will put it out. I mean, like you said, the dry lightning is a lot more frequent in the high plains.
any other questions coming up? Joe, you got a question?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. Hi. I just wanted to know, and I really appreciate you taking the time to show us around some of the websites and what you're looking for. From my experience with, I took the prescribed fire course at Oklahoma State University. There was a really interesting component where they looked at a lot of the historical data, prevailing winds, and those sort of things. And I was just sort of wondering how much of that you apply or use for planning in terms of your prescribed fire, and if that's a worthwhile exercise doing for maybe a region you're not so familiar with.
Yep, that's a good question. So yeah, I'm familiar with that data, and so we typically are planning. We plan our burns with our prevailing wind directions that we typically have, and during the springtime, that's usually going to be our southern component winds: west, southwest, south, and then southeast. Um, we do occasionally get the northwest wind or northeast wind, but those winds in the springtime are typically associated with the northwest is typically associated with cold weather, freezing temperatures, and northeast winds are typically associated with moisture. So we do get those, but they're pretty rare. I would say most of our burns happen in that west to south component. Southwest. The southeast winds, we will get those. They're, I think, a little bit more rare that we utilize. And they also seem to be, and maybe Brian has insight on why southeast winds are typically more unstable. I think it probably has something to do with it just drawing more moisture from the Gulf of Mexico up in here. So the atmosphere is just mixing a little bit more. So it makes our burns a little more unstable. We get more dust devils, more fire whirls, things of that nature. But I think as we move into different parts of the season, so when we get into like summertime, we're doing our summer burns. Like northwest wind days are awesome burn days because they're typically dry and they're cooler. And then, but our southeast winds or south winds are typically, really warm and really humid. So it kind of depends on the season. But most of the directions that we use are from that southwest component. But I think it would be very interesting to kind of do that same type of study or data here in Nebraska that they did at Oklahoma State. It'd be interesting to see how many different burn days with those wind directions that we actually have. Any other questions? Okay. Brian, do you have anything else to add, or as we kind of close out?
I think that was pretty much about it. There is one more website that I thought of that I can throw into the slides. It's kind of a it'll show like the frontal positions, high low pressure centers over the next like 2 days. That might be a little bit helpful for planning purposes. They won't have the wind barbs on there like what we showed on some of the maps, but they'll kind of show the general pattern. Whether a warm front is moving through or going to be moving through a cold front, et cetera. So those might be somewhat beneficial. I can throw those into the slides, that link anyway.
Okay, that'd be cool. All right. Well, appreciate everybody coming out. Hopefully you learned something, and feel free to reach out to myself or Brian if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer them the best we can, and stay safe out there burning this spring and get some burning done. I know hopefully we get a little bit of moisture here in the next couple weeks, just to kind of soothe some fears. But if not, just pick those parameters wisely and have a good burn season. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Brian.